It's the question that always comes up. If they're real, why don't they just land? Why not show themselves clearly, once and for all? That's what makes these stories so strange. Not just what people claim to see, but how carefully those moments seem to vanish. The sightings happen in remote places. The details get blurry. The evidence slips through the cracks. And even the most credible witnesses are left wondering what really happened. On Joe Rogan's podcast, these stories keep resurfacing, from former pilots, scientists, and people who never asked to be part of anything unusual. They don't all describe the same thing, but they all describe the same silence. It feels intentional, as if something or someone is choosing not to be seen. Not because it can't, but because it isn't time yet. And maybe that's the real question, not whether something's out there, but why it's keeping its distance, and what happens if that changes. Sometimes, the strangest part of a UFO sighting isn't what the object looks like. It's how it moves. No wings, no exhaust, no sound, just sudden acceleration, instant stops, or sharp angle turns that would liquefy any human pilot. And in some cases, they vanish, not over the horizon, just gone. Joe and his guest break down a theory that could explain it. What if UFOs aren't traveling through space the way we think of it? What if they're folding it? The idea sounds like science fiction, but it's deeply rooted in real theoretical physics. According to Einstein's general relativity, space and time are part of a connected fabric. That fabric can be stretched, compressed, and, in theory, folded. Some physicists have proposed that advanced civilizations, if they exist, might use this concept to create shortcuts through space-time, what we often call wormholes or Einstein-Rosen bridges. The classic visual is simple. Imagine 2 points on a sheet of paper. You could draw a straight line between them, but if you fold the paper in half and punch through with a pencil, you've just traveled between 2 points without crossing the space in between. That's how folding space would work, not faster than light, but bypassing the distance altogether. To an observer on the ground, this would look like the craft blinking in and out of existence. It might even appear to jump through the sky, vanishing from one position and appearing in another with no visible transition. But from the perspective of whatever's inside, it could feel as smooth and linear as driving down a highway. This could explain why so many of these objects seem to violate the laws of physics, why there's no sonic boom, no heat signature, no gradual motion. They're not accelerating through the air the way our aircraft do. They're moving through space itself, on a level we haven't unlocked. Some researchers even speculate that the glow or shimmer around certain UFOs could be a kind of byproduct, a field distortion caused by the warping of space-time around the object. That kind of gravitational manipulation, if real, would be beyond any propulsion system humans have ever built. It also reframes how we think about distance. If folding space is possible, then the stars aren't nearly as far as they seem. Light years become meaningless. The barriers between systems, or even dimensions, collapse. What we call travel might not be travel at all, just position switching across a compressed universe. And that leads to a deeper, creepier thought. What if they've been here all along, not out in the stars, but just one fold away, visible only when they choose to be, detectable only when something slips? Maybe they don't come to us at all. Maybe they're already here, and we've only caught glimpses, because we still don't know how to look. If there's one name that keeps coming up in every conversation about aliens and secret government tech, it's Bob Lazar. Lazar claims he didn't just see alien technology, he worked on it. Hired in the late 1980s to reverse engineer propulsion systems at a site near Area 51. He says he was brought in to study craft that operated in ways no human-made machine could, and the details he shared, they've only gotten harder to dismiss. Joe Rogan sits with Jeremy Corbell, who directed the Lazar documentary, and they go deep into the story. Lazar talks about Element 115, an exotic material he says powered the craft, long before that element was ever officially recognized by science. He describes a hand scanner used at the base that measured bone structure, tech that sounded insane back then, but has since been confirmed to exist at places like Los Alamos. He even predicted how the craft moved by generating a gravitational field that folded space around it. Skeptics have tried to tear the story apart, Records vanished. Schools claimed he never attended. His employment history was called into question. But then, his name appeared on lab rosters. Former coworkers came forward, and the more people tried to erase him, the more his story stuck. What hits hardest isn't the science, it's the consistency. Over decades, through endless interviews, Lazar's account hasn't changed. He never over-explains. He never adds dramatic details. He sounds like someone burdened with something he never wanted to carry. Rogan, usually skeptical, admits it. What if he's telling the truth? Because if Lazar is right, then alien craft didn't just crash here. They were taken, hidden, and studied, in secret. And that means the biggest mystery isn't what's out there, it's what's already here, and who's keeping it quiet. Some stories don't spread because they're unbelievable. They fade because they're too believable. In 1994, at a rural school in Ruwa, Zimbabwe, more than 60 children witnessed something no one could explain. It was a bright, cloudless day. The kids were outside for morning break, playing and running across the dry schoolyard. That's when it happened. A silver object descended beyond the brush line. No noise, no smoke, just silence. Followed by something even stranger, small figures stepping out. Dark skin, massive black eyes. Not walking toward the kids, but watching them. Standing still. And somehow, the children said, they felt a message. Not in words, but in their minds. A warning about the environment, about technology, about the future. Most of them didn't have the language for it at the time, but they felt it. Director James Fox joined Joe Rogan alongside legendary ufologist Jacques Vallée to talk about the case. They'd interviewed the children, now adults, decades later. And what struck them wasn't just how consistent the details remained, but how calmly they were delivered. No craving for attention, no dramatic retellings, just quiet certainty. The kind that stays with you. They went back to the school. They met the former headmistress who had been deeply skeptical at the time. But even she admitted something changed that day. The fear on the children's faces, the tears, the confusion. You can't fake that kind of panic. Not across 60 kids. So why didn't the world stop? Why wasn't this front page news for weeks? Maybe it's because the story was too strange. Or maybe it's because the witnesses were children, easy to ignore, easy to dismiss. But even now, decades later, those drawings still match. The details haven't changed, and the memory hasn't faded. Rogan brings up a haunting theory. What if schools aren't just a safe place to land? They're the perfect test audience. Innocent, honest, unfiltered. If something wanted to observe us without being challenged, where better to start than with children? Whatever the reason, that encounter in Zimbabwe remains one of the most credible, least debunked sightings in modern UFO history. And no one's been able to explain it. Not then. Not now. Maybe it's not about proof. Maybe it's about patience. Because the more you listen to these stories, the quiet sightings, the impossible craft, the people who walk away changed, the more it starts to feel less like a mystery and more like a pattern. They show up just long enough to be noticed, but never long enough to be understood. They vanish just before the cameras lock on. They leave behind traces, questions, and silence. And somehow, that silence speaks louder than anything else. It suggests they're not lost. They're not hiding. They're choosing when to appear, where, and to whom. Choosing what we're allowed to see. So, maybe the question isn't why they haven't landed. Maybe the real question is, what are they waiting for? And what happens when that waiting ends?